Welcome to another edition of AUHSD Future Talks. I'm your host, Superintendent Michael MATSUDA of the Anaheim Union High School District. And these talks are all about the future for our kids, for our 30,000 students, and what that means. And it's not just our kids, but I think America's next generation of students and the world that they will inherit post-COVID-19. And I think, as the audience knows, it's going to be a changed world, a challenging world, and a world also full of opportunities, as many of our guests have shared. And I'm so excited to introduce our next guest. He is Dean Richard Arum, the Dean of the School of Education of UC Irvine. And Richard brings an amazing lived life to us because he's a national expert in the areas of educational reform and social justice. And the reason, social justice, I think that's a big issue now nationally. But Richard has that lived experience because many of you might be familiar with his father, who's very famous boxing promoter, Bob Arum. And Bob Arum knew people like Muhammad Ali, and many of the advocates for civil rights in the 60s and 70s. And Richard, as a child, was exposed to a lot of these experiences. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce our guest, Richard Arum, the Dean of the UCI School of Education. Richard, what are some of your thoughts about growing up in a household with so many civil rights people?
Yeah, well, thank you, Superintendent Matsuda. I've so much enjoyed working with you since I've been at UCI, and it's a real pleasure to be on this, have this forum to discuss these issues with you. Growing up as the son of a boxing promoter, you might predict many career outcomes, but to understand kind of where I went with my life, after I graduated college, I went and worked in Oakland, California, in a local high school there for almost a half dozen years before going back to Berkeley. And the reason why that happened, I think, looking backwards, is the profound impact that figures like Muhammad Ali and the larger civil rights community had on me when I was a kid. And so I had this real unique experience of growing up with Ali in our house regularly, growing up literally at his knee. And, he was such a larger than life figure that embodied how one not just pursued excellence in their career and their profession, but how one advanced their commitment to civil rights, to justice and equality for all through their work. And again, growing up that way really convinced me from a very early age I had to choose a path in life to find meaning and purpose in my work. And I've done that through education.
Well, and you've done you have an amazing body of work about racial and social stratification in the K-16 world. And what I've noticed about you, Dean Arum, is, you're very unconventional and innovative. And many of the sort of deans of schools of education are focused on teaching future teachers and admins, which is really the main focus. But you've extended that. Not only are you focused on excellence with the next generation of teachers and administrators, but also you are working in the university, right, and raising the bar of educational excellence. Can you share a little bit about what that work encompasses?
Yeah, well, of course, we're so proud of our teacher education program. I know many of them have ended up in Anaheim Unified High School District, and hopefully they're making a profound difference on the community. But a top education school at a major research university like UCI. And the UCI School of Education, it's a top 10 public school of education. The responsibility is that you go beyond just the ordinary of producing great teacher education candidates, but you use educational science to make a difference in the university as a whole, as well as the community around it. And so we've used the tools and techniques of educational science, that is careful measurement of students' educational experiences, trajectories, and outcomes to work to improve educational delivery and ensure and advance educational equity at UCI. And we also are trying to do that with our partner schools like Catella High School and other schools and districts in the community. So again, how do we use educational science? How do we use careful measurement, not for accountability, counterproductive accountability mandates, but how do we use measurement to understand what works for students and how we can help ensure student success for all?
You know, I'm going to go deeper with you on that, but I do want to give a little more context to where you're coming from, because you did publish a national study which received a lot of attention called Academically Adrift Limited Learning on College Campuses. You studied 2,000 kids or students.
Superintendent Matsuda, I hate to interrupt you, but
Yeah.
my great claim to fame as an academic is that study made it into Doonesbury, the famous comic strip, one day. And so a lot of my colleagues at UCI, they have very distinguished scholars, National Academy of Education, National Academy of Science, but no one else has a framed Doonesbury cartoon strip on their wall at work.
And I'll bet the reason why, that because what you found was that after the first 2 years of college, a significant number of students demonstrated no improvement in a range of skills, including critical thinking, complex reasoning, and writing. Could you share a little bit about, I mean, to me, that's one of the big foundational pieces that led to what you're interested now in terms of looking for these measures of this type of what we call soft skills.
Yeah, right. I think it was a bit of a wake-up call for higher education as a whole. And again, this organization, the Council of Aid to Education, devised this performance task, a performance task that you would want a college graduate to be able to do well when they finished college and were in the workforce. And so the task was to give them something to do that required critical thinking, complex reasoning, and writing, a task for them to complete. And this task we gave to them when they started college. The end of 2 years, we actually a follow-up study at the end of 4 years. And what we found, as you said, was large numbers didn't improve on this measure at all. And when we looked at the surveys, we asked this, what they were doing in college. An equal number told us that they were doing really very little. The students said they did not have a single class that asked them to read more than 20 pages over the course of the semester. And about a third of them said, we don't have a single class asking us to read more than 40 pages per week. And so the academic requirements were minimal that many of the students pursued. They were not engaged. Many of the hours of studying were low. And so for those students, it's not a surprise that they did not develop these important skills that would ensure not just workforce success, but success in navigating the responsibilities of citizenship, democratic participation as graduates. So it really requires us to think, how do we think about the curriculum and instruction throughout the K-16 system so that students are more academically engaged in developing these necessary skills.
Now, it's interesting that you brought up the connection between academic engagement and citizenship. And I know that's another dimension of some of these new metrics you're trying to bring forward. Can you explain about that connection?
Yeah, thank you, Superintendent. If we ever needed a reminder in our society about the importance and the link between education and citizenship, it's this moment that we're in right now. And a healthy democracy has differences of opinions and disagreements and reasoned debate and discourse. And sometimes even it gets a little heated. But an unhealthy democracy is one where the polarization is so great that there can't even be reasonable discussion around matters of public health and safety and general well-being. And I really worry that the moment we're in today is such a moment where we have, for a complex set of reasons, uh, have adults in society that are not able to think through the complexity of some of the problems we're facing. I'll give you an example: the complexity of managing public health while simultaneously bringing the economy back, or confronting the environmental crisis that rages all around us, literally rages, because Superintendent Matsuda, the fires are at both of our doorsteps as we're called today. And so we need to develop the critical thinking skills, the reasoning skills, the dispositions, the intellectual dispositions around intellectual humility and openness to new information that are going to allow our society to move forward together.
So what does that look like in a classroom? What is intellectual humility? How would you define that?
Well, so you alluded earlier to the work we're doing at UCI. We partnered with ETS, Educational Testing Service, the leading assessment firm in the country, and we designed these performance tasks to give to our students at UCI to actually assess some of these things. So
Wow.
there's an assessment we gave the students on confirmation bias. We ask the students, we give them some information, we ask their opinion on a subject. Then we introduce new information to them, and we see whether or not the new information leads them to be willing to change their opinion from their earlier initial statement. And so you can actually assess the extent to which our students do they develop the intellectual habits of mind that allow them to be open to considering new information when it disagrees with our initial judgments to make reasoned decisions. And again, these are the skills necessary for the workforce, but also for democratic citizenship.
Yeah, I really like this concept of developing sort of intellectual habits of mind, a sense of open inquiry, because and seeing the world in shades of gray rather than black and white. I think that especially as we go forward in a very uncertain, unstable world ahead for this Generation Z. I wanted to touch upon another area of interest that you've sort of uh, developed is this connecting youth. We're working with inner city youth on connecting their behaviors, attitudes, and competencies around digital media and learning. I think that's another area in terms of like the social justice and trying to, connect a lot of these disengaged kids to the world of digital learning and media.
Yeah, no, we are, for better and worse, we're in digital media.
Yes.
And as educators, we have to uh, not ignore that reality, but figure out ways we can harness it to our advantage to achieve educational goals we want. And so how can we use digital tools to help us connect students to their interests, to interests that align with careers, to to bringing them into contact with people that share those interests and mentors that can help guide and support them along their way. It would be irresponsible for us not to use and take advantage of those digital tools that exist.
Yeah, because it is connected to this disintegration of democracy, right? Because young people they're being manipulated by social media, and they need to have the skills to understand how they're being manipulated, right? And so this understanding the difference between fake and real news, right? For example.
Right. So another example from the work we're doing at UCI, I said we partnered with Educational Testing Service. We also partnered with this researcher at Stanford University, Sam Weinberg. He's developed these online civic reasoning tasks. And so we have given students, when they start at UCI, these assessments of online civic reasoning. Here are some images and text you might confront on Twitter or Facebook. The task is, tell us about the reliability and validity of that information. How would you assess that as an individual? And again, we have them do this when they start, and then again after 2 years and after 4 years, because we think as educators, we can teach those skills, competencies, and again, habits of mind to help them undertake those complex tasks.
Do you find that students are interested in learning more about how they're being manipulated with this digital world?
Yeah, I think as citizens, we are all hungry for that information. I think we all recognize and have a certain unease about the extent to which these invisible digital algorithms continuously feeds us an information flow that's very hard to make sense of and navigate and ascertain the reliability and validity of information. And so I think young people, just like older adults, are really wrestling with how to deal with the complexity of the moment we're in.
Yeah, I think that the connection between sort of democracy, this digital literacy and manipulation, which is really underscored in a documentary that's out called The Social Dilemma, right?
It's required watching in our house. My wife saw it first, and the noted historian of education, Joan Malczewski, she required everyone in the household, including the children and myself, to watch that.
So did you hear that, everybody? Dr. Arum's wife is recommending this, so we need to watch it. I mean, I totally doubled down on that. We had an expert on cybersecurity that he also put a plug in for that. So I really feel that, yes, this is important.
Yeah, but, I mean, you hear really the voices of some of the original designers and developers.
And they're from Stanford too, right? Yeah. They're also from Stanford. So here's a question, right? Because it did in that documentary, it did touch on this sort of the mental health and what's happening, because everybody in education is concerned about mental health and social emotional development. Is this another area, another dimension in terms of the things that you're working on and how to connect all of this together? Because I think that the mental health of young people is the real vulnerable place where a lot of these manipulators are coming in and undermining democracy.
Right. So yes, in fact, we asked the students at UCI about their media usage as well as their mental health and stress that they're experiencing. And I think it would be naive to discount the role of social media in increasing stress and anxiety of young people and other individuals that are deeply engaged in this form of interaction. But I also want to say at the same time, as a sociologist, it's not just the technology, right? We live at a time with increasing economic polarization and marginalization. So people feel increased sense of insecurity about the ability to attain middle class success in our society. Those jobs, that outcome seems increasingly precarious. I think there's increasing environmental challenges we're facing as a society, as well as political challenges. And so the stress is not just the social media, but one thing we know about technology is that it amplifies. And so the social media is very effective at amplifying all the underlying stressors that we're encountering today.
So, Dean Richard Arum of UCI School of Education, what are your final parting words to our 30,000 young people as they try to navigate the future?
Well, it's a challenging time. I would remind them that every time is challenging in its own ways. Superintendent Matsuda, I know, all the challenges you overcame as a young person and what you've attained. So every generation faces and confronts its challenges. And I have incredible hope in young people that they will be successful in that journey, and that I would encourage them to educate themselves broadly in terms of the competencies, dispositions, intellectual dispositions, and acts that will help them navigate the complexity of the world going forward. And those are things like we talked about: critical thinking, complex reasoning, openness to new information, intellectual humility. Some of the things that you've talked about in terms of the 5 C's that you've promoted at Anaheim: creativity, collaboration, communication, character. Really, I would encourage young people to embrace that path and that journey, and I'm sure that success will be in your future, and you'll make a contribution to our society as a whole.
Wow. Richard Arum, thank you so much for those words of advice to our young people and to all of us. On behalf of the district and the Board of Trustees, thank you, Dean Richard Arum.
Thanks again.